The wind doesn't howl here, it just moves. A cold, dead push through the naked branches of the New Hampshire woods. It sweeps across the two-lane blacktop of Route 112, a winding road that cuts through the White Mountain National Forest, a place where the towns are just clusters of houses, where the streetlights give way to pure darkness, and where the silence on a clear February night is a physical presence. It is a silence that feels ancient and deep, broken only by the groan of a tree or the distant rush of a river under ice. This is a place where you can feel very, very small. On the night of February 9, 2004, this silence was fractured by a sound that was neither natural nor routine. Around 7 o'clock, in a small house perched at a sharp bend in the road east of Haverhill, a man named Butch Atwood was settling in for the evening. The bend was known locally as the Weathered Barn Corner. Butch was a large man, a former police officer, now working as a school bus driver and mechanic. His home was set back slightly from the road, a vantage point for the comings and goings on this quiet stretch. He heard it then, a hollow, grinding thud, followed by the distinct, sharp music of crumpling metal and breaking glass. It was the sound of a vehicle leaving the road. He pulled on his boots, not bothering with a coat, and walked out into the biting cold. The night was clear, the stars sharp pinpricks in the black sky. The temperature was plunging through the teens. His breath plumed in front of him as he trudged down his driveway and looked west. There, maybe 100 feet away, a car was nosed into a snowbank, its front end wrapped around a sizable tree. It was a small, black Saturn sedan. Steam, or perhaps condensation, whispered from its damaged radiator, creating a faint ghost in the beam of his flashlight. As he approached, he saw a figure. One person, a young woman standing outside the driver's side door. She was moving, seemingly unhurt. She turned to face him. Later, he would tell police she seemed shaken but coherent, not obviously drunk. She told him she had swerved to avoid a deer. Butch looked at the car at the road. He offered to call the police. Her reaction was immediate and insistent. "No," she said. "Please, no, I've already called AAA." Butch Atwood knew this road. He knew there was no cell service for miles in any direction. It was a lie. He told her firmly that he was going back to his house to call for help. He turned and walked away, back up to his warm living room, where he dialed 911 at 7:27 p.m. That brief encounter, lasting no more than 2 minutes in the freezing dark, is the last verified, unambiguous sighting of Maura Murray. By the time the first police officer, Haverhill Police Officer Bruce McKay, arrived at the scene just minutes later, at 7:46 p.m., she was gone. The car was there, locked. The interior dome light was on, casting a sad, yellow glow on the empty seats. Her belongings were strewn inside, but Maura had vanished. In the span of perhaps 20 minutes, on a desolate road in the depths of winter, she stepped out of the known world and into a mystery that has thickened, rather than cleared, with every passing year. To understand the weight of that disappearance, you have to know who Maura Murray was before she became a face on a poster, a name in a headline. She was 21 years old, a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. To her family and friends, she was a constellation of bright, sometimes contradictory traits. She was first and foremost an athlete, a gifted distance runner in high school in Hanson, Massachusetts, where she led her team to a state championship. She possessed a fierce, internal competitive drive. She was disciplined, tough. This athletic prowess earned her an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. It was a huge achievement, a point of immense pride for her father, Fred Murray, a former Army officer himself. But West Point was not the right fit. The rigid structure, the intense pressure it wore on her, she struggled academically. After 2 years, she transferred to UMass Amherst to study nursing. It was a fresh start. She was bright, attractive, and had a long-term boyfriend, Bill Rausch, a fellow West Point cadet who had graduated and was now an Army officer stationed in Oklahoma. She was close to her older sister, Kathleen, and her father, Fred, who had separated from her mother years earlier. On the surface, she was a high-achieving young woman with a supportive family and a clear path. Beneath that surface, however, cracks were beginning to show. The fall of 2003 was a difficult season. Maura was caught using a stolen credit card number to order food delivered to her dorm room. The incident was serious, a potential violation of campus rules that could have jeopardized her standing. It was out of character, an act of petty dishonesty that puzzled those who knew her. Around the same time, her sister Kathleen was battling severe, life-threatening alcoholism. This crisis weighed heavily on Maura. She was the kind of person who internalized stress, who tried to be the strong one, the fixer. Then came the week of February 2nd, 2004. A week that now plays out like a slow-motion unraveling, viewed through the painful clarity of hindsight. On Thursday, February 5th, Maura was working her shift as a campus security guard, a quiet overnight job. At some point during that shift, she received a phone call. To this day, the exact nature and content of that call remains private, known only to the family and investigators, but its effect was catastrophic. A fellow security guard found Maura shortly afterward. She was sitting at a desk, visibly, uncontrollably upset. She was sobbing, emotionally shattered. The coworker described her as being in a state of near collapse. She was so distraught she was sent back to her dorm room. Whatever news or conversation transpired in that call struck her to her core. The next day, Friday, her father Fred was in town. They had plans to look at used cars, as Maura's Saturn was old, prone to problems, and she needed something more reliable. They spent time together that afternoon. That evening, Fred checked into a Howard Johnson's hotel in nearby Hadley. Later, Maura borrowed his new Toyota Corolla, the car they had just been looking at to potentially replace her Saturn. In the early, dark hours of Saturday morning, around 3:30 a.m., she was alone in that car on a quiet road in Hadley when she lost control. The car veered off the road and slammed into a guardrail. The vehicle was badly damaged, though drivable. No other cars were involved. When police arrived, Maura was alone at the scene. She was shaken, but physically okay. Fred Murray was called. He came to the scene, dealt with the police. He later said he was frustrated but concerned. He was firm with her about the seriousness of the accident, but not angrily so. He took her back to his hotel room. In that room, he recalled her being deeply upset, repeating over and over, "Oh my God, my dad's going to kill me." It was an expression of guilt, of shame. Fred assured her it was just a car, that it could be fixed. They both eventually went to sleep. The next morning, Saturday, they had breakfast. Fred said she seemed better, quieter. He gave her a ride back to her dorm. He left for his home in Connecticut later that day, believing the crisis was averted, that it was just a bad car accident. But for Maura, the crisis was accelerating. Sunday, February 8th, Maura is alone in her dorm room. Her father is gone. Her boyfriend Bill is thousands of miles away. The weight of the credit card incident, her sister's struggles, the second devastating car accident in 2 days, and whatever transpired in that phone call on Thursday night, it all seems to converge. That afternoon, she sits at her computer and begins to compose emails. She writes to her boyfriend Bill. She tells him she needs some time alone, that she's going to be out of touch for a week. She doesn't elaborate. She writes to her professors and her work supervisor. In these emails, she tells a story. She says there has been a death in the family. She says she needs to leave immediately to go home. It is a complete fabrication. No one in her family had died. It was a lie designed to buy time, to create an excuse for an absence. That Sunday night, she begins to pack. She removes a photograph of her boyfriend Bill from its frame and leaves it on her bed. She packs a backpack. She takes her textbooks, some college paperwork, her toothbrush, makeup. She packs a box of her favorite comfort food, Betty Crocker vanilla cake and cookie dough. It is not the packing of someone fleeing forever. She does not take her birth control pills. She does not take her most prized possessions. She does not empty her bank account, though she would soon come close. Monday, February 9th dawns. It is the last day. At 1:00 p.m., using her cell phone, Maura calls a number that offered listings for rental condos and cabins in the Bartlett, New Hampshire area. Bartlett is a small town in the White Mountains, about 30 miles east of where her car would later be found. She leaves a message on an automated service. The call lasts 1 minute. Sometime after this, she gets into her black Saturn. The car is loaded with her packed belongings, including the alcohol from a previous unknown purchase, a bottle of Bailey's Irish Cream. At 2:18 p.m., a surveillance camera at an ATM in Amherst captures her. She is alone, wearing a dark-colored jacket. She looks calm, focused. She inserts her card and withdraws $280. This nearly empties her account, leaving only a few dollars behind. From the ATM, she drives a short distance to a liquor store, Liquors 44. Inside, she buys more alcohol, a bottle of Skye vodka, a bottle of Kahlua, a box of Franzia Cabernet Sauvignon. The total is around $40. She pays in cash. The clerk who served her would later remember a polite, calm young woman alone. There was nothing in her demeanor to suggest panic or distress. Then she points her car north. She leaves Amherst, Massachusetts, and enters the highway system, heading towards New Hampshire. The drive from Amherst to the crash site in Haverhill, New Hampshire, is roughly 3.5 hours under normal conditions. Investigators have painstakingly tried to trace her route. Did she take Interstate 91 north, the most direct path? A receipt found later in her car suggests a stop for gas at a station in Hooksett, New Hampshire, off Interstate 93. This receipt is timed at 3:40 p.m. If accurate, it means she was taking a slightly more eastern route, perhaps heading towards the Bartlett area via I-93 and then Route 112. The drive is a quiet one. She is alone with her thoughts, the hum of the engine, the bottles clinking softly in the bag beside her. What was going through her mind? Was she following a plan? Or was she driving aimlessly, trying to outrun the turmoil inside her? The White Mountains in February are not a casual destination. They are a serious, cold, isolated place. They are a place you go with intention. The timeline tightens. The gas stop at 3:40 p.m. From Hooksett to Haverhill is about 2 hours of driving on winding, two-lane state roads. This places her arrival at the crash site on Route 112 between 5:40 p.m. and 6:00 p.m. if she drove directly. But the crash wasn't reported until 7:27 p.m. There's a gap, an hour, maybe more. Where was she during that time? Did she stop somewhere? Was she lost, navigating the confusing back roads of the White Mountains? Did she sit in her car somewhere, thinking, drinking? This missing hour is one of the first great puzzles of the case. At approximately 7:00 p.m., her car, traveling west on Route 112, approaches the sharp bend near Butch Atwood's house. The road is icy in patches. Perhaps she is fatigued from the drive, emotionally drained or impaired. Perhaps she overcorrects or indeed swerves for an animal. Her Saturn slides, leaves the road on the opposite side, and crashes into a stand of trees and a snowbank. The airbags do not deploy. The damage is significant but not catastrophic. She's able to get out of the car, and then Butch Atwood arrives. Their interaction is brief, but every word is scrutinized. She tells him about the deer. She pleads with him not to call the police. He insists he will. He leaves. From his living room window, he and his wife see her moving around the car, a flashlight or the illumination from her cell phone bouncing in the dark. They see her several times, then they don't. They assume she got into a passing car or that the police had arrived and taken her. At 7:46 p.m., Officer Bruce McKay arrives. His headlights illuminate the scene, the damaged Saturn empty. He finds the car locked. The driver's side door is locked. The other doors are locked. The trunk is locked. Through the windows, he can see the interior light on. He sees a backpack. He sees textbooks. He sees the box of Franzia wine on the passenger seat, its plastic bladder partially deflated. He sees other liquor bottles. On the driver's seat, he later notes, is a small diamond necklace, a gift from her boyfriend. He also sees something strange. Stuffed into the tailpipe of the Saturn is a rag. It is wedged in tightly. This bizarre detail would later be explained by Fred Murray. He said that the Saturn had a recurring exhaust problem. If the tailpipe wasn't periodically cleared, carbon monoxide would build up and cause the car to stall. Fred claimed he had shown Maura how to stuff a rag in the tailpipe as a temporary fix to increase back pressure and keep the car running. It was a piece of homespun, arguably dangerous mechanics. Whether it was related to the crash or not, it was there, a silent, odd clue. McKay sees a single set of footprints. They lead from the driver's side door forward along the road eastward in the direction Butch Atwood had gone. They are visible in the plowed snow at the road's edge. They walk for about 100 yards or so. Then at a point where the snowbank ends and the bare pavement begins, they stop. They simply vanish. There are no footprints leading into the woods, no footprints leading across the road. It is as if she walked on the road and then ceased to leave an impression. McKay calls it a missing person. A young female, possibly intoxicated, last seen minutes ago. The temperature is now in the low teens and falling. The wind chill makes it feel far colder. Maura is wearing a dark coat, jeans, and possibly a hat. She's not dressed for a long trek in the wilderness. She has no snowshoes, no heavy winter boots. The initial search that night is localized and frantic. Haverhill police and soon officers from neighboring towns walk the immediate roadside. They shout her name into the blackness. They sweep their flashlights across the frozen ground, the skeletal trees. They hear nothing, they see nothing, no response, no glimpse of a dark coat moving in the woods. The forest absorbs their light and their sound. The official large-scale search begins the next morning, Tuesday, February 10th. It is a massive undertaking. New Hampshire Fish and Game takes the lead, coordinating search and rescue teams. Dozens of volunteers comb the area. They walk in grid patterns, shoulder to shoulder, through deep snow. They check drainage ditches, culverts, abandoned structures. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras fly low over the dense forest, looking for the heat signature of a human body. The conditions are brutal. The snowpack is several feet deep in the woods, making progress slow and exhausting. The terrain is not flat. It is a rolling, rugged landscape, thick with underbrush and deadfall even in winter. The search is predicated on the most logical assumption that Maura, frightened and possibly impaired, fled the scene to avoid a DUI arrest and succumbed to hypothermia within a relatively short distance. Hypothermia acts quickly. Confusion sets in. Victims often make irrational decisions like removing clothing or burrowing into small enclosed spaces. Searchers look for any sign of disturbance, a broken branch, a matted down area in the snow, an article of clothing. They bring in dogs. A specially trained search and rescue dog is given a scent article, a glove or an item from Maura's car. The dog picks up a scent trail almost immediately. It leads east from the crash site down Route 112, the same direction indicated by the footprints. The dog follows the trail, moving with purpose. It goes about 100 yards. It passes Butch Atwood's house. It continues to a point in the road opposite a row of 3 houses. And there, in the middle of the eastbound lane, the dog loses the scent. It stops, it circles. It cannot pick it up again. This moment is critical. For dog handlers and investigators, a scent trail ending abruptly in the middle of a roadway strongly suggests one thing: the subject entered a vehicle. The scent pool is there where she stood, and then it is carried away. Other explanations are possible. The wind could have scattered the scent particles. A passing plow truck could have obliterated them. The sheer cold could have made the scent too faint to follow. But the specificity of the location is haunting. It is a precise pin on the map of the mystery. The search expands day by day. They search a 5-mile radius. They drag nearby ponds and streams, though most are frozen solid. They bring in cadaver dogs. They find nothing. Not a mitten, not a scrap of fabric, not a footprint leading into the woods. After nearly 2 weeks of intensive effort, the active ground search is scaled back. The consensus among many of the professional searchers is grim. If she were in those woods, they would have found her. The terrain, while difficult, was not so vast or impassable that a body would completely disappear in the winter. The lack of any physical evidence in the forest began to whisper a different, more sinister possibility. Into this vacuum of answers steps her family, led by her father, Fred Murray. Fred is a no-nonsense, retired Army officer. He arrives in New Hampshire and is immediately frustrated by what he perceives as a sluggish, disorganized response. He believes the police wasted precious hours in the first night by not initiating an immediate, aggressive search. He becomes a constant presence, a thorn in the side of the Haverhill police. He walks the woods himself, day after day, in all seasons. He puts up thousands of flyers. He speaks to every media outlet that will listen. Fred's conviction is absolute. His daughter did not simply walk into the woods and die. He points to the locked car. Who runs into the woods in a panic and locks their car? He would ask repeatedly. He believes the locked doors indicate a conscious decision to secure her belongings, perhaps with the intention of returning or of getting into another vehicle. He fixates on the timeline, convinced there is an unaccounted-for period between the crash and the 911 call that holds the key. He openly suspects foul play, often implying that someone in the local area knows what happened. The official investigation, led first by Haverhill Police and soon taken over by the New Hampshire State Police Major Crime Unit, follows every thread, no matter how thin. They reconstruct Maura's last days in minute detail. They interview her boyfriend, Bill Rausch, extensively. He is devastated, cooperative, and provides insight into her state of mind. He confirms she was stressed but had given no indication of plans to disappear. They interview her friends, her sister Kathleen, her mother. They delve into the credit card incident. They look at her phone records, her computer. The picture that forms is of a young woman at a breaking point. The pressure was multifaceted: academic stress, family trauma, relationship strain, and the looming consequences of her mistakes. The series of actions in her final days, the lie about a death in the family, the cash withdrawal, the purchase of alcohol, the drive north, all point to a plan. But what was the plan? Was it self-destruction? Was it escape? Or was it simply a few days of solitude to think, a plan that went horribly wrong? As the months turn into years, the case ossifies into a set of enduring, competing theories. Each has its proponents, its evidence, and its fatal flaws. The first theory is accident and exposure. This is the official leaning of the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department and many experienced search and rescue personnel. In this scenario, Maura, fearing a DUI arrest after 2 accidents in quick succession, flees into the woods to hide from the approaching police. She is disoriented, possibly intoxicated. The cold is relentless. Hypothermia sets in within hours. In her confused state, she travels farther than searchers anticipated, finds a secluded spot under a fallen tree or in a rocky crevice, and dies. The forest is a perfect custodian of secrets. It can conceal a body for decades, especially if animals scatter the remains. This theory is simple, tragic, and requires no other actors. It is statistically the most likely fate for a missing person in a wilderness area. Its greatest weakness is the intensive search that found no trace and the dog-scent trail that ended on the road, not leading into the trees. The second theory is voluntary disappearance. This is the most romantic and elusive idea. It suggests Maura Murray staged her own vanishing. The preparations were deliberate, the emails creating an alibi, the cash for anonymity, the packed bags. The car crash was an unforeseen complication. When Butch Atwood said he was calling police, she saw her plan falling apart. She seized the moment. She walked down the road, was picked up by a pre-arranged contact, or hitched a ride with a stranger and started a new life somewhere else. This theory accounts for the lack of a body. It paints her as a survivor, someone who escaped a life that had become unbearable, but the obstacles are immense. How does a young woman with no extensive survival training, no large sum of money, and deep family ties disappear completely in the 21st century? How does she avoid all facial recognition, all social security number use, all chance encounters for 20 years? And perhaps most painfully, how could she subject her father, to whom she was so close, to a lifetime of agonizing uncertainty? The emotional cost of such a disappearance seems incalculable. The third theory is foul play. This is the darkest and most complex narrative. It hinges on that narrow window of opportunity and the dog's lost scent. Here, Maura, stranded and desperate, accepts a ride from a passing motorist. That driver harbors violent intentions. She is assaulted and murdered, her body disposed of far from the scene. Another variation suggests a more targeted encounter. Someone in the area, at one of the nearby houses, or someone who saw the accident, approached her with malicious intent. This theory explains the complete absence of evidence in the woods. It explains why she has never been found. It turns the case from a tragedy into a crime. But it also requires a perpetrator who left no forensic evidence at the crash site, who has never confided in anyone, and whose crime was one of perfect, random opportunity. It turns the quiet community of Haverhill into a place hiding a terrible secret. Over the years, other sub-theories have emerged, each layering complexity onto the case. Some have focused on the rag in the tailpipe, wondering if it was a signal or a sign of something more nefarious. Others have delved into the personal lives of individuals in the area, a path that has led to speculation and, at times, unfair harassment. The case has been a fixture on true crime television, in podcasts, and in online forums where thousands of amateur detectives dissect every timestamp, every grainy photo, every police report. The location itself, that bend on Route 112, has become a grim tourist attraction. People pilgrimage to stand at the tree, now scarred and stripped by souvenir hunters. They feel the isolation, they take pictures. They try to imagine those few minutes in the dark. For the Murray family, this public fascination is a double-edged sword. It keeps the case alive, but it also turns their personal tragedy into a public spectacle. Fred Murray fought tirelessly for answers. He filed lawsuits to force the release of police files. When they were finally released in 2012, they were filled with black redaction bars, hiding more than they revealed. He became a gaunt, determined figure, aging on the roadside with his signs, pleading for information. The New Hampshire State Police maintain that the case is active and open. They have pursued thousands of tips. In 2019, they excavated the basement of a home near the crash site after receiving information, but found nothing related to Maura. Each new lead brings a flicker of hope, which then fades back into the enduring mystery. The emotional core of this story is not in the theories, but in the silence. The silence of a father waiting for a phone call that will never come. The silence of a sister who lost her confidant. The silence of a life interrupted, frozen in time at age 21. Maura Murray is not just a missing person. She is a question mark imposed on a family, a community, and anyone who hears her story. Why does this case endure? Perhaps because it is a perfect storm of ambiguity. It is not a clear-cut crime scene. It is not an obvious suicide. It is a disappearance that exists in the murky space in between. It features a relatable protagonist, a college student having a very bad week, whose ordinary troubles collide with a moment of extraordinary, irreversible consequence. It plays on our deepest fears, being alone, being vulnerable, making one wrong choice that changes everything. It also touches on the awe-inspiring power of nature, its ability to erase a human being without a trace. So we are left with the images seared into the narrative. A young woman at an ATM, her face pale under fluorescent lights. A car sat at a lonely bend, its light burning in the vast dark. A set of footprints that walk confidently down a plowed shoulder and then simply stop. A father walking through the autumn leaves year after year, calling a name that only the wind answers. The questions are the same as they were on that first cold night. Did she run into the embrace of the woods, and does she rest there still, waiting for the spring thaw that never comes for her? Did she step into a vehicle, placing her trust in a stranger who betrayed it in the most final way? Or did she have a destination in mind that night, a cabin or a motel, a place to be alone and think, a destination she never reached because a patch of ice and a tree intervened? Maybe the most haunting question is the simplest. What was she thinking in those final, quiet moments as she stood by her wrecked car, seeing the lights of Butch Atwood's house, knowing the police were coming, feeling the immense, cold darkness of the New Hampshire wilderness pressing in from all sides? What decision did she make in that instant? We will likely never know. The wind still moves through the trees on Route 112. It whispers through the pines, rustles the dry leaves in the fall, and drives the snow in horizontal sheets in the winter. It carries no answers. It just moves, as it always has, through the space where a young woman vanished, leaving behind only a locked car, a set of fading footprints, and a silence that has lasted for 20 years.